I really felt like I had two lives. I had my on the mountain, competition world that I was existing in, and then I had this other sort of thing that really drew my attention, which was like the business side of things. And at a certain point, once retirement happened, I was just like, oh, I'm just going to flip it and really focus more effort on this. So it wasn't too big of a change, and I still snowboard and skateboard all the time. So I'm just not getting, scores for it anymore. But yeah, it's good.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of SBJ's On Stage. I'm your host, Taylor Bloom, and this week's conversation is with an Olympic gold medalist who is also one of the most recognizable names in global sports. You know him as Shaun White. This conversation took place on May 21st at SBJ's Force event in New York City, where Shaun sat down with SBJ staff writer Chris Smith. Known for redefining what's possible on the halfpipe, Shaun is now shifting his focus to investing and the business side of snowboarding with the launch of the Snow League. In this episode, you'll hear how he's building a platform designed to modernize the sport, empower athletes, and bring snowboarding to a broader global fan base. Let's go on stage.
Shaun, you're drawing a big crowd here.
Yeah, right.
How are we feeling this morning?
Thanks for having me. I'm great. Happy to be here.
So I got to start off with the most important question.
Yes.
How's wedding planning going?
Oh my goodness. We got to get a planner first. So that's no, I was recently engaged, proposed, and she said yes, thankfully. Yeah, thank you. It deserves a little. Thank you. Making big moves these days. But no, we're really happy, and yeah, we're going to get a planner and figure it all out. But it is a big question, yeah.
So the McCourtys kind of teed this up for us, I think, in a really well way. Big word yesterday was multi-hyphenate, right? Few athletes, in my mind, fit that category as well as you. Accomplished snowboarder, 3-time gold medalist in the Olympics, but also actor, musician, now entrepreneur, investor. How do you think of yourself these days? I mean, in your mind, who is Shaun White now?
Yeah, it's a great question. For me, post-retirement, I don't know. I guess I felt like during my days of competition, I was always working with brands. I mean, I was first sponsored when I was 7 years old. And so being with brands and people within the industry, I got to learn from them, how they're marketing their products, how they're developing their products, what they're doing. And so I just got an inside look behind, the curtain of all these amazing brands and businesses and things. And so when I got a little older, through success, these brands started asking me to do signature products, help create lines, do all these different things with them. And, I really felt like I had two lives. I had my on the mountain, competition world that I was existing in, and then I had this other sort of thing that really drew my attention, which was like the business side of things. And at a certain point, once retirement happened, I was just like, oh, I'm just going to flip it and really focus more effort on this. So it wasn't too big of a change, and I still snowboard and skateboard all the time. So I'm just not getting, scores for it anymore. But yeah, it's good.
How has retirement been treating you?
It's good. The funny part about it is I remember the day, or maybe a couple weeks or months after I retired, my body just went, oh, we're good? And now my back started to hurt. Everything started to hurt after I retired. I think I was just so in it. I was like shaking it off that I had these aches and pains. And now it's like a little bit, the age is catching up with me, which is pretty funny. But no, it's good. It's really good.
So I know we're going to be talking about a lot of brand work today. I should have asked, who was that first sponsor at 7 years old?
It was Burton Snowboards.
Okay.
Yeah. They didn't make kids boards at the time. My mom started calling around, and she got a hold of somebody from Burton Snowboards. I'm sure she hyped me up. She was like, he's incredible. I could barely stand on a board at this point. But, ended up getting me a board deal with them. They're like, this is great. He can test out the new products. He can be part of our new kids, line. And that was enough for me to be like inspired to take it to the next place. And a part of being, with the brand, they're like, he should do some competitions. And that really started me competing.
Okay, got it. Reminder to the crowd, I do have the iPad up here. If you have any questions for Shaun, submit those through the app. I'll try to work them in.
Yeah, please.
Curveballs only. So we've got a lot of ground to cover here. I think best place to start is probably what we just saw in that sizzle video. You have just launched the Snow League, new sports property, just started in March, had your first event in Aspen.
Yeah.
Hit us first off, what were your high-level takeaways? What was kind of the response, the feedback from the industry, from the riders, and what did you think of the first event?
No, it was incredible. It was one of those things where I've been in this industry my entire life, as long as I can remember, and, you just see the pain points because you're in it. You're like, God, I wish this, connected with that competition. I wish this was more like this traditional sport. And you realize that there's just like a gap in the market. There's something that's not happening here. And with all that experience and now knowing the resort owners and certain sponsors and things, I was like, okay, I'm probably one of the only people that could tie this all together. And so we created the league and did our first event in Aspen, and it was a hit. It was really exciting to see the athletes show up and just have this amazing experience, unlike any other event they've been to, which, we're using a venue that has, I've competed there, throughout my whole career, but to show up and see the venue and be like, wow, this feels different, it looks different, like everything to it. And then a lot of it was like, I hope this works out sort of thing. Because I went in there and used my own life experiences to change the format of how we compete. So like qualifying, normally you get, a large group of athletes. You do one run, then you wait, you do one more run, and they pick somebody, they pick the top 12 or so to move on to the finals. It can be a long wait in between that. I remember being at the Olympics, I did my first qualifying run, I fell, and I waited over an hour and a half for my next run, which talk about being literally iced. I was sitting there like, okay, no pressure, gotta wait. How do you stay warm? How do you stay excited? So we broke it now into heats that it's just a whole different way of doing it. But the long story short is that the athletes won't wait over 20 minutes in between each run. So you can stay fresh, you can stay focused. You're right back at the top, here we go, it's my second chance. And then for finals, we did like a head-to-head bracketing system. So normally you show up at a competition and you have your finalists. Everyone does 3 runs and they pick a winner. So as the consumer at home, you're watching, you're just like, all right, if you're new to the sport especially, even if you know the sport, it's a little confusing. Like, what happened 10 runs ago? I'm forgetting what's happening. Well, why is this better than that run? So we've adopted a format. It's more like March Madness. It's a head-to-head format, which people already understand and can grasp. And now you're pitting athletes against each other. And what's exciting about that is you can really understand what's going on. You're watching this run versus that run, this athlete versus that athlete. And then, in the end, it created this much more dramatic experience. There were some upsets. There were some things that people didn't expect. And even for our women's competition, you get 3 runs. It's your best 2 runs. And it went all the way down to that 3rd run. And it was just big showdown. It was such an incredible experience. But, that was in theory the idea, but it really played out in real life. And it was incredible. So I'm really proud of the team and just kind of the vision we had and pulling it off. It was great.
We spoke early on as you guys were getting the wheels turning on this, and you sort of described that first event in a way as sort of a trial event, right?
Yeah.
See what's going to work, what we can do better, and adapt from there.
Yeah.
What does that scorecard look like? Looking ahead, you have 3 more events in this first season coming next winter. What did work that you want to do more of? What maybe didn't quite work like you thought it would, or something you think you could do better?
Yeah, we're still gathering all the information. That was the biggest, is like we started the athletes meeting before the competition started. I made my big speech. It's my Braveheart moment. I'm like, we're going to get out there. We're going to unite the industry. Let's do this. No, it was really great, though, and I got to talk to everybody. I was like, we want your feedback. Like, I don't want to be the, competitor that was in the sport, retired, and has lost touch. I want, you, the athletes, to help us shape the future of this sport. I want your feedback. Don't tell me everything was great. Tell me what we can improve upon. So there was some tweaks, little things to maybe, some of the format, some of the start times, some of those things. But overall, it was just an incredible experience. And the feedback was, very heartwarming to hear from them and to see them, actually. I remember getting to the after party and, we've never really done this in our sport, but we made jerseys with their number and their name and their country, flag, and we go to the after party and they're wearing their jerseys at the after party. Like, you wouldn't catch me ever wearing my jersey out to the dinner afterward or something, but they were just so proud. They're so thrilled to be a part of something new and big happening in our industry. So it was really, really, cool feedback.
Give us a little taste of the long-term vision for this property, because so I mentioned before you have 3 events back to Aspen, Switzerland, and China.
Yeah.
Introducing skiing, right? This
Yes.
coming winter. Beyond that, where do you see this going?
Well, it's amazing. It's really, an international sport. I mean, if you look at the last Olympic, final scorecard, there's from Japan, from Australia, from Switzerland. Like, people from all over the world, and we're really kind of following that sort of F1 tour model as our North Star, and when you look at the industry, it's incredible to see. The best comparison we've been using was golf. When you look at sport for sport, there's about 60 to 65 million participants in golf. These numbers are not exact, but they're close. And there's about 130 million participants in winter sports. So it's a huge field of people. And within this winter sport world, it's a average household income much higher than golf. You know what I mean? So you have people that want to show up, they want to have this amazing experience, and we're kind of trying to give that, experience that you would get if you went to Aspen or you went to Switzerland, to the like these incredible places. And along with that, bringing these elevated sponsors, these amazing experiences and things, and really like putting this sport in a different light. So being international, growing the footprint, that's what we're doing.
There was actually a question from the crowd about how you see this fitting into the action sports landscape, right? Obviously you have the X Games out there. There have been action sports, snow sports, competitions. Did you think about sort of differentiating from what was there already?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that was like our big thing. It was like, how can it be different? Oh, we'll do jerseys. No one's doing that. Like, well, okay, they're a fully new format, a way of like viewing the competition that's going to be different. I mean, everything. We went down to like a different type of logo than you've never seen before, something more that you'd find in a traditional sport, the trophies are being designed by Tiffany's. We're getting like every little detail. I even had a huge sit down with our commentators. I'm like, we need to educate people at home about what's happening. Like, I don't want to hear on the microphone like, whoa, that was gnarly. That was a sick move he did. You can be excited, but hit me with sports science. Like, they're going 60 miles an hour down a 22-foot half pipe, flying 20 feet out. That's over 40. So he's doing multiple flips, degrees of rotation. Like, give it to me so I can understand at home. Like, this is two buildings stacked on top of each other, and this is what's happening. I don't know. It just has never been explained that way. And so we've really been working hard at making sure that people at home are getting, a better understanding of the sport, and really, a professionalism that's never been seen before. So that's, I think, one of the things I'm most proud of is like, being unique in the space and doing something different.
So you mentioned a few of your sponsors, and I think one of the most interesting things to me is how your sponsor roster is really global blue chip brands, right? Tiffany, Hublot, Pacifico, Marriott Bonvoy.
Yeah.
Historically, action sports has not always been the most welcoming to sort of those non-endemic sponsors, right, who don't spend a lot of time in the space. How did you approach that, trying to integrate them into what you're doing and bring them into the space?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. I mean, for us, it's difficult in the beginning because you're just like, picture this. You're like, you can't really show materials, visuals, things. You can kind of describe this idea, but you can't really show it. So in the beginning, there was a lot of this, like, well, how's it going to be different? Why? What's new about it? And how do we activate our brands within this landscape? And like I mentioned, the average person attending Aspen, you have the Swiss businessmen, you have the Kardashians. Like, it's a very, high-end community that attends these resorts. It's a very expensive sport. It's always been, and it continues to be. And so it's like tapping into that market rather than going after, this younger group that I think, within the sport, there's always been like this stereotypical kind of thing going on, where in the beginning, snowboarding wasn't really, well received at the mountains, and it's kind of a culture where, this rebellious sort of attitude has been driving us for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that we need to get rid of that. I think it shows through our sportsmanship and the tricks that we're doing and the mental, the mindset it takes to do these tricks, flipping through the air, all these things on an icy, windy day, while everyone's watching. That's already in there. And so I think it's like growing outside of that kind of stereotype of the sport and bringing it to the masses. And that's going to happen through our marketing, through our branding, the way people are consuming the sport at home through their televisions, through their phones and devices. So,
you mentioned snow sports are obviously expensive. Any thoughts about how Snow League might be able to lower the barrier to entry, maybe make things more accessible for people interested in the sport but maybe haven't had the opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of our goal for this event. It's like, hey, look, let's cater to this high-end kind of community that's already at these resorts, but then like let's drop it down and make the GA like really accessible. Like, you know, even some locals, you know, hey, let's work together. You know, where kids can get in free. You know, a lot of people, we were just giving away tickets to get people excited, and that's what's so nice about it, especially Aspen. Like, we're working with the community. You know, we don't want to show up and be like, all right, we're taking over your town, you can't come to this event. And, you know, like, no, we're closely working with, you know, the town of Aspen and the people of Aspen to make sure that it's accessible for everyone. And really, you know, even for me, I remember being a little kid going to my first competition, pro event, and just being in awe of what was possible. Like, wow, I've never seen people do this before at this level, this scale, and it really inspired me. So we want to make sure that that happens for, you know, the next generation, and yeah, keep it, like I said, keep the grassroots, but also, you know, let's grow and elevate into something new.
Sticking with the sponsor side, so I mentioned Pacifico. They're obviously here with us this week. Curious how you lean on brands like that. Obviously, you know, important from a revenue perspective, right? Cutting a check for you guys. But how do you lean on them for that on-the-ground experience? Right? We were talking about bringing these people in, having the energy and the excitement.
Yeah.
What role have the sponsors played for you there?
No, it's great. I mean, I think the sponsors have to, you know, connect with the community that we're already, you know, catering to. And I think, look, I was already a big fan of the brand growing up in California. And so, you know, it was just kind of like a natural fit. They'd done things in the world of action sports before. And so, you know, it was like, oh, this is great. And when working together, I think that was the biggest part. It wasn't like, hey, here's what we're going to do. It was like, what do you think we should do? I'm looking at the ads, I'm adjusting the colors and the, you know, photos, like this is how it should be viewed by people, like where is the area gonna be, you know, where people will be having a drink and still viewing the half pipe, like how can we work together to make this an amazing partnership? And we've gone even one level deeper where we're now collaborating on merchandise and gear that is so cool. I'm so excited for people to see it. It's really got me excited, you know, and it's like, how do we work together to continually you know, build and try new things, yeah.
At the individual level, you mentioned sponsored at 7 years old, and you have since then been, in my mind, you know, one of the most accomplished sort of brand pitchmen in sports. As you look back at that, I guess a few questions just about what stands out as maybe the deals that were most rewarding or most successful in your mind, and what are the commonalities, right? What makes a sponsorship work in your mind, right, when you do some of those deals?
Yeah, I mean, sponsorship's always an interesting thing. I've always felt like my job as an athlete joining a sponsor was to best fit their mold, which would be their slogan, their color palette, their, you know, way of doing things, but try to remain, you know, a bit of me. You know what I mean? So like, don't just throw my personality out the window. Like, this is how people normally see me. I don't want to deviate too far from that. And at a certain point, I think through enough success, I was just like, hey, look, I don't want to work with brands and even talk to brands that don't want to collaborate. You know, it's got to be like a mutual thing. And so, yeah, I've been really rewarded in that sense of having fewer sponsors, but deeper relationships with those sponsors. So, you know, I've had clothing lines that turned, you know, from a signature snowboard all the way to like an entire men's line, to a women's line, to a kids line, to, you know, eyewear, outerwear, like all these different things. And that was really cool. I think personally, there's a fun connection that you have with people, like the event or with a brand, something like when you create a product and there's so much product out there for people to, you know, purchase or whatever. Like there's just so much. And when somebody locks in on an item that you've created and you see somebody in the street wearing your jacket and you're like, I made that, that's so cool. They decided that out of all this stuff, that this best suits their personality, what they're about represents them, and whether they know you did it or not, like there's just a connection there. So I love that as the kind of reward of it all. You know, like obviously having a successful business is amazing and that's the goal, but that's, I think, the part that does it for me the most, that gets me excited about creating and developing different products and things and working with brands. It's like that kind of trickle down.
Right. So I feel like in your career, we've seen stretches where you've been in the spotlight a lot, and then stretches where, you know, Shaun kind of disappears a little bit. I realize some of that is training for Olympics and kind of going off radar to focus on the sport. But in terms of doing stuff off the field, you know, acting, music, brand work. What is the thought process maybe or the rubric that you work through in trying to figure out when's a good time and how much you want to do beyond the sport? And that's sort of that balancing act you were talking about before.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, and it's something, it's a great question. There's kind of like a deeper level to it. But I realized at a certain point in my career that if I was really going to set myself up for the future financially and all these things, I was going to have to make the majority of my money off the field of play. So traditionally, sports, you have like your team deal. That's a massive deal. Your team, you practice with the team. That's like there's this, and then everything else. And I felt like within our sport, and it's something that we're trying to change with the Snow League by offering the highest prize purse there's ever been in the sport. But you can't really make a living just competing, being a snowboarder. So you have to go outside of that. So that really kind of drew my interest when I was younger to be like, oh well, what else can I get involved in? And luckily, it was something that I actually enjoyed doing. But I think, now that I'm older, looking back at it, like it's just a different sort of landscape now. And I really think that, building these brands and doing these things, like I said, having a sponsor and fitting their mold, we're creating the mold now. We're creating, like when looking at these competitions and things, it's like, well, yes, let's have the biggest prize purse, equal pay for men and women, all these things that aren't happening at other competitions, and we need to lead through example, and the rest will kind of follow. So it's just been an interesting landscape, and for me, you mentioned disappearing, and so, like I found that my time away from snowboarding while competing was just as important as my time on the mountain. So, it was something, when you grow up and you're just eating the same cereal every day or doing the same thing, it's like you just get naturally, as people, we just kind of get over it. And so that was my way to kind of maintain like an excitement within the sport. I needed a break to be like, okay, let's take some time away, come back, and now I'm really excited about it. And it's a pattern that I followed when I was a kid, because I grew up at the beach in California. I had asthma. I hated the cold. I didn't know how cold it was until I went pro, and they're like, you got to go to Norway. And I'm like, just go. My dad named me Shaun after Shaun Thompson, a professional surfer, South African surfer. He loves surfing, and he tried to get me, to this career path, but in surfing, and, it just didn't work out. But I remember like scrolling Kelly Slater's Instagram from Norway, like freezing, and I'm like, he's on the beach in Tahiti, just like, I'm like, oh, Dad was right. But yeah. So.
The industry's changed a lot during your time as a snowboarder. How has the expectation from sponsors changed over those years, right? I feel like in the early days there was a lot of slap a sticker on your helmet or your board, right? And now it's a little bit more of what you have to do on social media, digital media, right? More engagement. And you touched on this a little bit before, but I'd love to go a little bit more detail, kind of, what is that like now, and how much has that transformed since you started riding?
Yeah, well, everybody knows, obviously, with social media, it's become a more of a currency than an actual sharing platform, especially with brands. You're like, wow, I can tap into this person's, audience right there, click of a button, and we can get all these people excited about something that we're doing. So, the landscape's changed there, but I think brands are just looking for that like deeper relationship. I think, they don't, like you said, putting a sticker on and sending you off to the competition doesn't really do it anymore. You need to kind of have this connection or a storyline to it. Like me saying that I've been sponsored by this brand since I was 7 years old, like that's an impactful thing. I've used these products to get to where I am today, So I think, it's the story, it's the give back, it's a lot of different things when you're talking with sponsors and yeah.
So we mentioned at the outset, you're now a bit of an entrepreneur last few years, right? Starting to build some different companies.
Yeah.
I had a few questions coming about White Space, so maybe we start there.
Yeah.
That's your snow sports company.
Yeah.
Walk us through maybe a little bit of why you started that, the opportunity you saw, and maybe your vision for that.
Yeah, no, so White Space, the name was obviously like a play on my last name, but the term white space actually means a blank canvas. It means a gap in the market, a void, waiting for something new. And I loved that when looking at the sport and kind of my career, because, within the sport of snowboarding, you really can create a new trick. You can invent a new trick and become the best in the world. So, there's only so many ways to run a drill or throw a ball or something like this is really, the artistry to it. You have to create something new. And when looking at my career, I was like, well, okay, this athlete here, they're doing that trick. Like, well, what's everybody not doing? What trick could I do that would just make me stand out, among everyone else out there on the field? So, putting that into the brand, my brother's an amazingly talented artist, designer, so we connected, and he helped me launch the brand White Space, and it's just been so rewarding. We have like a little roster of young riders, up and coming, talented people. You'll see some of our athletes competing at the next Olympics, but it's incredible, and it's something where I've taken all that information and knowledge and experience from the brands I've worked with and been able to put it into this company, and also those little things that are different. I remember, I need some help. It's the red bottom shoes, the women's shoes, Louboutin. I remember seeing those everywhere, and I was just like, yeah, here we go. I see you can spot them without knowing the thing. And so I remember seeing these shoes everywhere and going, gosh, it'd be interesting within our brand. Like, we need some recognition. We need something that people, catch people's eye. And it was a pain point during the developing of my signature board every year that we're like, we come up with a really cool top graphic, and then the base graphic was like, well, what are we gonna do for the base graphic? It just became this nightmare every single time around. And I was like, well, what if we do something like this with these shoes, or like, the LV print, or the, Gucci stripe, Adidas, something. And so I was like, we should create the snowboards where we do the top graphics are different, but the base graphics are always the same. And we took the name White Space with the white stripe down the bottom of the board and thing. And so now when you're on the mountain, if you see a board with the whites, that's us. It's instant, you see it, you know what's going on. And that was something that came from, just being around brands and wanting to create brand recognition and realizing that no one else in the space was doing that. So we would be the only one that had this consistent board graphic that people could recognize, latch onto, things like that. So it's always trying to do something different in the space and something new and unique. And so, yeah, that brand has been amazing, and I'm just so proud of it. And I'd ridden for that company Burton for, the longest time, like I mentioned, since I was 7 years old. And unfortunately, the owner of the brand passed away. They were going through a lot of change, and I kind of took a pause moment going, wow, like, if I'm going to do something new, like, what's the next, 5, 10 years of my life look like? And do I want to continue on with this brand that might not be the same? And we've still an amazing relationship. They actually made our vest for the league event, so a great relationship still there. But I was like, wow, this is time to take everything I've learned and put it into something of my own, and it's just been so rewarding.
Beyond it being financially successful, what in your mind would make White Space a success 5, 10 years from now? Sort of what's the barometer that you're using, or the metrics that you're looking at?
Yeah. My own personal thing was like, I want to ride down the mountain and look up at the chairlift and see all the striped boards on the, which I've gotten some of, but it wasn't like all of them, so I'm picturing that in my head. But no, I think, the brand being a standalone thing, like, really, we started it as this, and it's taken a life of its own. And, I think for us to grow outside of just the winter space, we're starting in winter because that's, where the most experience I have comes from, but really branching out into all sports and really kind of having this year-round presence, and, hopefully at some point having our product on the podium at the Olympics, something like that would be incredible. So yeah.
You've also been doing a little bit of investing, I know. Yes. So working with Unrivaled Sports, new youth sports investment platform with some youth camps in Oregon. So I would love for you to tell us a little bit about, I guess maybe first and foremost as an investor, sort of what excites you, what interests you in that regard, and why does youth sports and youth action sports make sense as a property?
Yeah, well, look, I've always enjoyed, even the charities I've worked with has all kind of been based in kids and youth. And so I remember, hearing about, this build out of camps, and they have these camps, obviously, for traditional sports like baseball and football and soccer and things. And I was approached to, build this vertical of, snowboarding, skateboarding, mountain biking, like, I hate calling it action sports, but, for now, we'll call it.
Sorry, I keep doing that.
No, it's okay. Yeah, but so these sports are we needed somebody to come in and give the eye of like, yeah, no, this is a great investment. This is a great camp. This is thing. And so you mentioned Oregon. We started right away. I was like, if there's one place to start, it's this camp in Oregon. I went there every single summer as a kid. It's got this kind of like staple within the community of winter sports where everybody's got this experience. You can run into people like, oh, I went to camp there. Oh yeah, I remember this and I remember that. And, so it was just like this nostalgic kind of place. I used to camp out, and the family had a van, and we would camp in the parking lot and like go ride the mountain every day and go use the facilities down below the mountain. And anyway, so we started there and really brought some new life and some excitement to the camp. Brought in more capital. We're building more bunks. We're doing all these things, and I'm so excited. I'm going there actually for 2 sessions this summer. Selfishly, I get to go there and play dodgeball and hang with these kids and like go snowboarding and skateboarding. It's so much fun. But we've recently built this giant bag. It's a bag jump. So within the sport of snowboarding, we used to have just kind of like rock, paper, scissors, who was going to try the trick in the ice. Thank goodness technology's caught up, and we're now using what's called airbags. It's like what stuntmen were using to jump off of buildings and safely land. So that technology kind of trickled into snowboarding. But there's this new advanced bag that actually goes down the entire slope of the mountainside, and we're going to be unveiling that this summer. So we'll see incredible talent practicing year-round on this feature that we built. And when you look at the landscape within snowboarding, there's a lot of incredibly talented Japanese snowboarders. And when you look at the landscape in Japan, there's a lot of indoor facilities that they have access to. So they're actually riding year-round. And I think it's not a surprise that a lot of them are at the top of the podium right now because they have access to these things. So we're trying to like level the playing field and also give the access to people from all over that want to come train. And I always get asked about the future of the sport, and I always feel like the next amazing talent is going to come from a place that doesn't have any snow. They're going to come from a place that they've got access to just train night and day, every single, even Dubai has more, the ski facility in Dubai has more attendance than Aspen because it's a year-round thing. People are going all the time. So yeah, the future is going to be amazing, and I'm so excited to see what kind of talent comes from, this new setup.
You perfectly set up my next question, because some of the programming you're involved with this summer is with USK and Snowboard. Their youth development camps, they're looking for the next Shaun White, right?
Yep.
And question came in from the crowd that I think is a great one, is sort of how much do you think about your role in kind of building that next generation, right? Do you feel a responsibility to some of these kids, or want that to be a part of your legacy? How do you think about that, just personally, right, as a rider, not even as a business?
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Like I think... look, selfishly, all of these businesses are things that I'm really excited about that I can bring something to the table that I don't think many others can. So it's definitely captured my focus right away. But yeah, I think within the sport, like I was the kind of anomaly that kind of bumped out and was able to cross over into mainstream media and do deals outside of the sport. But as that happened and as my career, ended, it slowly has kind of shifted into this space where there's just not as much attention to the sport, and the amount of competitions are going down. All these things were happening, while at the same time, the visuals at the Olympics and the sports that are getting into the Olympics is going up. So they started with half pipe, then they moved on to slope style, which is a series of jumps. Now they have big air. They're talking about another discipline. So the viewership's there, the excitement's there. People love these sports, participating and viewing, but the infrastructure on the back end in between the Olympic years is just not there. So I always remember thinking like, well, how could I give back to the sport? And I even got kind of like, I don't know, I'm choosing the word here, but like, I got some criticism for not giving back to the sport in a particular way. But at that time, I'm like, well, I don't really see a path. I'm still competing myself, I was 19. I had the long hair. I was like, it's like, I'll get to it. But no, I truly feel like I can honestly say that like through White Space, through the camps, through especially the Snow League, this is my way of giving back to the sport and creating this environment for that next generation of rider to not only excel, but to be put on the pedestal they deserve for these sports, and move away from the term action sports to just sports. Just because we're not throwing a ball or something like that, I would say that there's just as much athleticism happening. There's just as much focus and training and like ups and downs and hardships and like there's a lot that goes into these sports, and I'm going to shine a light on it and bring it to the forefront. And it's just been exciting to be in this position at this point in my life.
As an investor, where else are you looking now? Anything else you want to do?
All sorts of stuff. We started a bank. So much as we'll talk about it another time. No, yeah, it's exciting. Look, for me, it's got to be something that excites me, that I feel like I could be a big part of. And yeah, I don't know. I think for me, it's always just like I'm not. I'll always kind of take the call. I'll always see what's next. And I think when I really look at it, I have to really think hard about it. I feel like I'm just getting started. I'm only a few years out of retirement. There's so much time on my hands. There's so much going on, and I have amazing people around me. We have amazing investors, and so I think kind of sky's the limit at this point. What's next? And yeah, hopefully I'm sitting here a few years from now telling you about all my new stuff. So
looking forward to it.
Yeah,
So we got last few minutes here. Figure we'll saved hopefully the best for last. Milan Cortina, Olympics coming up next winter.
Yeah.
First and foremost, what are you looking forward to? How excited are you here? It's going to be a weird one for you, right? First games that you're not competing in 20 years.
No, I'm going to definitely be there to support our athletes, Team USA and White Space side. But yeah, I'm to be completely honest, I'm a little nervous about it because it's the first Olympics I've been to, Winter Olympics, that I haven't competed in. So I know there's going to be this feeling of like, missing certain things and wanting certain things. But I'm excited to like step into this new chapter and go cheer on our hopefuls, and NBC is our broadcast partner for the Snow League. So there's like a cool crossover there. So potentially some cross marketing and promotion things. So I'm going to really go over there and make a splash and yeah, try to enjoy myself.
So I need to ask, you just watched a bunch of the top riders in the league you created that you always wanted to have.
Yeah.
Just talked about been in the Olympics every year since 2006 in the Winter Games. Mm-hmm. What's the itch like to come back?
To come back? Oh man, I just described my back. That was the first question. Their itch is always there. I've talked to other athletes and they're like, oh no, I'm still watching TV. Like I could have made that catch. I totally could have. This guy's so slow. You know what I mean? Like they're like, that doesn't go away. It's just part of you. But when I really think about it and like the effort it would take and the focus and these things and the amount of time I would be, taking away from these other things that I've just like brought to life and I'm so excited about. I just think, I'm happy with my decision, and I'll learn to, guide myself into this next chapter gracefully rather than trying to jump back. But yeah.
On that subject, I think my favorite question on the iPad, and I apologize to
I just say all that, and I definitely come back next time. It's just like, totally. So there we go. At the top of it.
Question from the crowd. Can you still do the double McTwist 1260?
Oh, yeah. That's a staple. Come on. The double McTwist 1260 was a trick that I invented going into the 2010 Olympics in Vancouver. And the funny part about that trick is it's the first trick that everyone in the media could pronounce. They're like, he's doing a twisted something. Like, no one could ever name the tricks that were out there, but the double McTwist 1260 for some reason. And my theory is it sounds like something you'd order at McDonald's. So everybody's like, oh yeah, the double McTwist 1260, of course, delicious. But yeah, it's one of my things where I think I'm gonna test how I'm aging. Can I still do that trick? That's gonna be my North Star of like, where am I at?
How often are you getting back into a half pipe at all?
As much as I can, honestly, yeah. So at the camps in Oregon, there's multiple half pipes there. We'll be doing a session for the brand White Space. So we bring in our team riders, we ride with the kids, and then we're gonna do something really fun and exciting for the Snow League. We're gonna bring in the pros to ride with the kids, do like a miniature competition, some fun things. Really connecting that younger audience with the top tier, and yeah, it's one of those things where it's inspiring. You know, the pros get to have practice. I used to train there every single year, so it's going to be amazing. I can't wait.
Any conversations yet with Ski and Snowboard, with NBC about, you know, kind of playing a formal role in Italy? Whether that's on the broadcast side, on the team sports side, anything?
Yeah, there's talks. You know, things haven't been fully solidified yet, but you know, I think I'll be doing something with skiing probably, hopefully, and potentially, snowboarding for sure. I would love to do something, but skiing as well. It's one of those things where there's just as many skiers, probably actually more on the mountain than snowboarding. And so for our event in China that'll take place next season, we will be featuring snowboarding and skiing because there's a whole field of amazing men and women that compete in that sport, and we want to bring them along for the ride. So pretty excited about that as well. So we'll see how I fare if I get behind the camera, how I do up there.
You touched on this earlier, sort of, you know, the Olympics has been embracing, right? Not just snowboarding, we're seeing skateboarding now expanding, Tony Hawk pushing for skateboarding to get into the games. How important has the Olympics been to these sports, right? And to sort of bring in a mainstream audience or bringing in even more participants and kind of future pro athletes?
I think it was a great relationship, you know. Like I really feel like the Olympics needed snowboarding just as much as snowboarding needed the Olympics, you know. It's like I don't want to say aging sports, but it was like a certain audience. So like they want to capture that younger demographic, and that was the group that was into skating, was into snowboarding, and now have grown up and have kids of their own, and they wanted to get after that audience. And so it was this kind of perfect synergy of, you know, these events coming into the Olympics. There's a lot of like uncertainty within the sport because, again, this rebellious culture, we don't want to conform to this format and you know, keep it the same. And I really felt like, as a young adult trying to be a professional snowboarder, I was kind of just like laughed at. They're like, you're throwing your life away, kid. Like, you know, I asked my teacher, I was like, hey, I need help, you know, extra schooling, I'm missing days. And they're like, well, we just can't help you. I was like, well, why? And they're like, well, you're not on our list of sports. We don't find your sport legitimate. We got horseback riding, we got tennis, we got ice skating, we got, you know, and so I had to go to great lengths to like finish my schooling, to do simple things, to just be a snowboarder. And nowadays with the Olympics, you know, it just carries such weight with it. You know, before people were fighting just to get on the mountain as a snowboarder. Now after the Olympics, resorts are competing for who has the best snowboard park, because they want that young demographic to come through. They want people. And so it really changed a lot for the sport. And I was thrilled to see skateboarding and surfing get into the Olympics because, again, another huge field of athletes that really aren't getting their kind of time in the spotlight. And they're working just as hard as everyone else. And it was really funny because when that happened, everybody turned to me. They're like, what's going to happen? Like, we saw this in snowboarding. What's going to happen to surfing and skateboarding? What's going to go down? And I just said, look, like, the trickle down will be amazing. It's a thing where, you know, there's more money in the sport, there's more eyeballs on the sport, there's more participation in the sport. And so I thought it was an amazing thing to have the Olympics, and I just happened to be the guy at the, you know, tip of the spear when all that happened. So yeah, great place, right time, and yeah, what a moment in time. That was great.
Well, and with a few quick hitters, I'm going to lean on the crowd.
Please, yeah.
You've competed in 5 Olympic Games. Which one was your favorite?
Favorite? Oh, it's tough. I say the first one for sure. It was 2006. I was 19 years old. I was competing in Italy. And I'll never forget winning and coming down and seeing my mom, and I was just like, you know, like, all right, I did it. You know, and she was like, everyone's crying. I'm like, oh, this is, no one's cried at the events before, and everybody's in tears, and you know, when dad's crying, it's like something's up, something like, you know, dad tears. And I remember my mom looking at me and she's like, you just don't get it. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, you don't get it. Like, you just won the Olympics. You will forever be Shaun White, the Olympic gold medalist. That title will follow you the rest of your life. Like, Jill's talking about it. And she was right. After that, everything changed in my world, and it was just such a wild sort of ride after that. I went from like a level of recognition that I'd, you know, only dreamt of in our sport, and legitimizing a sport that was, you know, all the teachers that said that we were throwing our lives away, and all the times calling in sick for work, my parents, you know, all these things, and we actually did it. We bet on this sport, and it actually paid off, and I was able to win the Olympics. So yeah, incredible time, favorite Olympics for sure.
Describe your brand ethos in 3 words.
Come again?
Describe your brand ethos, the essence of Shaun White in 3 words.
I would say performance, humor, and I gotta go with it's a term thrown around too much, but I would say authenticity. It truly is. It's something where I really believe in what I'm doing. It feels real to me. The sponsors feel real to me. I can see it all in my head, and so.
Let's end with a look ahead. What excites you most? Next 5 years, next 10 years, what are you most amped about?
Well, I'm getting married. Gotta write my vows. There's a lot planning. No, I'm excited. There's so many amazing things in this next chapter of life for me. So especially the league events, obviously the camps, the brand, and a bit of the unknown. There's so much coming around the corner that I feel like through success in these endeavors that we're doing, it's going to open up new doors to things that I'd never really thought of doing or dreamt of doing, and I think that's probably the most exciting thing to see where it all ends up.
Well, we're all looking forward to getting our invitations to the big day.
Yes.
And we're under your seats. We're unfortunately out of time, but this is tremendous. Thank you, Shaun White.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of On Stage. If you enjoyed this exclusive conversation with Shaun White, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with colleagues or anyone interested in the intersection of athlete innovation and sports business. Here's a closing thought starter for you. How would your industry look different if the athletes or end users designed the platform from the ground up? I'd love to hear your perspective. Shoot me a note at tbloom@sportsbusinessjournal.com. We'll be back next week with another exclusive conversation from a leader shaping the future of sports business. Until next time, stay tuned and stay ahead. This is On Stage.